Imagine trying to paint a masterpiece, right? But you can only look at your canvas through like a tiny mail slot in your front door.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
It is. You can see maybe one little square inch at a time, and you push your paintbrush through the gap, but you have zero idea how the whole picture is actually coming together.
Yeah, you're just guessing.
Exactly. And for a long time, that is exactly what coding with AI agents has felt like. I mean, we've been treating these incredibly powerful models like magic 8 balls, just trapped inside these tiny text terminals.
Right. But if you look at the landscape this week, someone is finally, they're kicking that door wide open.
Yes, they are.
Live from the turning point of history at Beskar.
Welcome to AI Deep Dive with Beskar. This is our News of the Week format where we take a step back and just, look at the whole board. I'm Adam, your host, and I'm joined by our resident expert, Amy.
Thrilled to be here. And to our listeners, if you've been following along, you know we just did 3 highly focused deep dives. But today, we are zooming out to give you a landscape overview of the current week's news.
Which is packed. And real quick, if you are getting value out of this News of the Week format, please take a second to hit subscribe. It's the best way to let the Beskar team know you want us to keep making these.
Totally. So what's on the agenda today?
Okay, so we're going to be exploring Nimbalyst, which is this fascinating visual workspace built for Claude Code and Codex. Then we're unpacking the new Stitch SDK from Google Labs.
That one is huge.
Oh, it's massive. And throughout all of this, we are weaving in some hard-hitting perspectives from our team on the future of model context protocols and the very messy reality of AI skill management.
Before we dive into the heavy stuff, though, we should probably hit some of the quick updates dropping this week.
Right, yeah. Lots of rapid-fire news. First up, Claude just increased their usage limits for users. They are doing a 2x usage bump for the next 2 weeks.
Which is honestly perfectly timed if you're experimenting with some of the heavy-duty code generation we're about to talk about. You're going to burn through tokens fast.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of new tools, Bonus Desktop just got a release.
Yes. The Manus desktop release is super interesting for local agent workflows. And then there's auto context, too.
Yeah, auto context is really pushing the boundaries on how agents retain project memory.
It is. And, zooming out even further on the tech side, there's this underlying trend we're seeing this week with the actual execution of programs being baked directly into transformers separately.
Wait, unpack that a little bit.
So historically, the model generates the code, and then an external environment runs it. But researchers are exploring how to bake the execution state directly within the transformer architecture itself. It's a bit of a technical footnote right now, but it's something we're watching closely because it changes how models reason about code logic.
That's wild. Though I gotta say, even with all these new tools, there's still so much friction, which reminds me of what David Kramer was saying this week.
Right, his commentary on developer tools.
Yeah, he made this really great point that the friction we're feeling, it's not a problem with any one specific platform. It's an overall issue with developer tools right now. The integration points are just clunky across the board.
Exactly. It's an industry-wide growing pain. Which actually brings us perfectly back to your mail slot analogy.
Yes. Let's get into Nimbalyst, because the terminal pain is so real. I've been trying to use coding agents in my CLI, and it is exhausting.
It really is.
You type a prompt, you get a wall of scrolling text, and you're forced to hold the architecture of your entire application in your head while the agent just spits out diffs.
Right. And for you listening, when we say diffs, we just mean those raw lines of code showing what was added or deleted. But a diff doesn't tell you how a change in your backend database actually affects the visual layout of your front end.
Not at all.
It's a massive cognitive load on the developer to bridge that gap. And that's the exact problem Nimbalyst is trying to solve.
So break Nimbalyst down for me. What makes it different from just having like Claude open in one window and my code editor in another?
So Nimbalyst is positioning itself as a visual workspace and session manager. It's designed specifically around models like Claude Code and Codex. The whole philosophy is side-by-side AI assistance without context switching.
Because right now it's just tab soup.
Exactly. You ask your terminal agent to do something, it writes the code. Then you tab over to your IDE, find the file, maybe tab to a database viewer, then tab to a browser to see if the button looks right. Nimbalyst brings all of that into one unified visual environment.
Okay, I saw the included CSV integration though, which threw me off. Like we have Excel, We have Google Sheets. Why does an AI coding workspace need a built-in spreadsheet?
Because data manipulation is fundamentally visual, but developers usually handle it via code. Like if you had a messy CSV file with 10,000 rows, you'd normally write a Python script using pandas, right?
Yeah, to drop the null values or whatever.
Right, and you wouldn't actually see the data changing until you open the final output file. With Nimbalyst, the CSV acts like a familiar spreadsheet, but the AI runs the macros.
Oh,
You just tell the agent, hey, filter out any user without an email address and reshape the date column to a European format. You don't write the Python script. You just watch the spreadsheet update visually in real time.
okay, I see. That makes total sense.
Mm.
Because if the AI hallucinates and drops the wrong column, you see it instantly, rather than discovering a break in database 3 days later.
Exactly. Tightening that feedback loop.
Mm.
And they are applying that same visual feedback loop to system architecture. You can design wireframes visually, and the agent generates the matching front-end code.
Oh, in the Mermaid diagrams, I was playing with this. For anyone who hasn't used them, Mermaid lets you generate complex flowcharts just by writing text. But Nimbalyst lets you describe the architecture with natural language, and the agent builds the chart.
And they take it a step further with Excalidraw integration, too.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Live editing Excalidraw.
Yeah, right in the workspace. Excalidraw is basically a digital whiteboard. Normally, AI can't interact with a whiteboard. But under the hood, Nimbalyst has the agent output spatial coordinates, translating your language into structured data that Excalidraw renders live.
So you're literally collaborating on a canvas with the AI.
Exactly. It places, connects, and styles elements for you.
I was looking at how it exports Prisma schema files, too. Like, you draw the visual database design, and the AI translates that whiteboard sketch directly into back-end code. It bridges the gap between brainstorming and implementation so smoothly.
It does. But what's really fascinating here is how they manage all this parallel work. They have a session Kanban.
Okay, yes. Explain this, because this broke my brain a little bit.
It's a full task tracking system, like Jira or Trello, built into the workspace. But the AI agents interact with it. They can create tasks, edit statuses, and move things from the backlog to implementing to complete.
So the AI is managing its own ticket system.
Yeah, because it has the full context of the visual workspace, it knows when a front-end component is finished. It moves the card itself.
Okay, I need to pause here, though, because I want to offer a bit of pushback. This brings us to a massive blind spot I see the industry ignoring right now, and it's a core Basecar viewpoint.
Let's hear it.
Tools like Nimbalyst make generating code and database blueprints incredibly fast, almost dangerously fast. But we have to remember that productivity gains with AI are entirely front-loaded.
That is such a critical distinction. The initial burst of creation feels like magic.
Exactly. You spin up an entire app in an afternoon. But the second half of that reality, the part everyone forgets, is that the maintenance cost of all that generated code is delayed. And it is significant.
Oh, absolutely.
If you use an agent to generate 20,000 lines of code, you still own that code. You have to debug it, update it for security patches, untangle it 6 months from now. If you didn't write it and didn't understand it when the AI wrote it, that maintenance cost is going to hit your team like a freight train.
Which is exactly why this shift toward visual workspaces is so necessary. It might be the only viable way to mitigate that delayed cost.
How so?
By forcing you to keep the architecture visible. In a terminal, you're blindly accepting outputs. But if the tool makes you look at the Excalidraw diagrams and the side-by-side visual diffs, you maintain a human mental model of the system. It doesn't just become a black box of AI spaghetti code.
Right. So to you listening, we have a genuine question. How are you managing the delayed maintenance cost of your AI-generated code? Are you enforcing visual architectural reviews, or are you just hitting accept in the terminal and hoping for the best?
It's a question every team needs to answer this year. But, this leads us to a secondary problem. Nimbalyst solves the issue of human developers needing to see the UI. But what happens when the agent needs to evaluate the UI it just built?
Ah, right. An agent doesn't have eyes. If I tell a terminal agent to make a dashboard look modern, it can change the CSS, but it has no idea if the buttons are overlapping.
Exactly, and that is precisely the problem Google Labs is trying to solve with their new Stitch SDK.
So if Nimbalyst is the human workspace, Stitch is about giving the agent its own sensory tools.
Precisely. The core functionality of Stitch is allowing agents to generate UI screens from text prompts and then programmatically extracting the HTML and taking literal screenshots of what it just built.
I was reading their docs, and the way they handle design iteration is brilliant. You can specify a variant count like generate 5 versions of this dashboard. and they have these specific creative range settings.
The creative range settings are fascinating. They offer explore, refine, and reimagine.
What's the actual mechanism there? Like, if I tell it to reimagine, what is it doing under the hood?
When an agent uses reimagine, it's intentionally increasing the temperature of its design outputs, turning up the dial on creativity. But, more importantly, it's instructed to completely bypass the original DOM structure.
Oh.
Yeah, the DOM is the underlying skeleton of the web page. Instead of just changing a font size, Reimagine tells the agent to tear down the skeleton, build a totally new layout from scratch, and take a screenshot to see if it worked.
That is wild. And you can target specific parameters too, right? Like only iterate on the layout or just the color scheme.
You're programmatically directing the design iteration. And the way Stitch integrates into your workflow is incredibly telling about where the industry is headed. It integrates directly with the Vercel AI SDK.
Central nervous system for AI apps, basically.
Right, and Stitch plugs into that nervous system using an MCP proxy server.
Okay, MCP meaning Model Context Protocol. And honestly, I have a bone to pick with how everyone is talking about MCPs right now.
Let's hear the Beskar perspective on this.
The industry is treating MCPs like they are some magical revolution. But our stance is that MCPs today are mostly just thin abstractions over standard APIs.
That is a very fair critique. An API lets two pieces of software talk, usually designed for humans or traditional apps. Right now, developers are using MCPs as just a fancy wrapper so an LLM can trigger a human-designed REST API.
Right. It's a transitional phase.
Yeah.
MCPs shouldn't just be wrappers. They must evolve into higher-level agent-native primitives.
Let's ground that. What does an agent-native primitive look like?
Whoa.
Actually, think about it this way. A human uses a steering wheel to drive a car. If you build a robot to drive, sitting it in the driver's seat and making it turn the physical wheel is a thin wrapper. It works, but it's inefficient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
An agent-native primitive would be the robot communicating directly with the car's digital transmission, bypassing the steering wheel entirely.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Stitch is a massive step in that direction. They provide a Stitch tool client. It's a low-level data pipe that agents use to autonomously fetch HTML, request variants, and evaluate screenshots without a human ever looking at a browser. We are finally giving agents native tools,
Instead of forcing them to awkwardly borrow human interfaces. Which leads perfectly into a detail I noticed in the Stitch GitHub repo. If you look at their file structure, there is a folder labeled .agents/skills.
Ah, yes. The skills folder.
This brings us to our third major viewpoint for the week, expanding on some of Tariq's recent thoughts. The whole industry is obsessed with writing custom prompts to give agents new skills. But the real problem is not creating skills. The real problem is managing them at scale.
It is the Wild West out there. Someone figures out a clever prompt for SQL queries, saves it as a text file, drops it in a folder, and calls it a skill. But when you have dozens of agents doing hundreds of tasks, that breaks down entirely.
It's like having a giant garage tool chest where every drawer is just labeled Fix Thing. The agent reaches in blind, grabs the first tool, and suddenly it's using a sledgehammer to fix your front-end CSS.
Exactly. Our stance is that we desperately need a data-driven skill ecosystem. Skills can't be static text prompts. They have to be treated as versioned, measurable assets, like how developers treat code libraries in a package.json file. What version of React was that prompt written for? How often is it successful?
And the most critical piece of this, and if you're listening, we really want you to absorb this timestamping skill usage, is a critical signal.
It is the only way to effectively detect stale or irrelevant skills in your agent's workflow.
Break down why that matters. What happens if a stale skill is just sitting in my folder?
Let's say you have a skill in that folder that hasn't been called in 6 months. It's probably out of date. But worse, it might be actively confusing the model.
Because of the context window.
Exactly. The context window is the AI's short-term memory. Every time it tries to solve a problem, it scans that skills folder and loads instructions into memory. If you have dozens of outdated skills, you are cluttering the model's limited context window with digital cobwebs.
Right, it gets confused by conflicting legacy instructions.
If you aren't tracking when and how often a skill is used via timestamping, you aren't managing your AI. We're just hoarding prompts.
Hoarding prompts, that is so accurate. I know so many teams guilty of exactly that right now. We have to treat agent skills with rigorous version control.
We really do.
Now, speaking of agents taking over workflows, I want to do a very brief pivot. We've been deep in the developer weeds today, but there was a quick footnote in the growth marketing space this week proving this isn't just an engineering thing.
You're referring to the AI CMO ecosystem.
Exactly. It's a tool positioning itself as an AI-powered growth marketing agent. They have specialized sub-agents like a Reddit agent for community engagement, an SEO agent.
And included in that suite is Okara Chat, which acts as a secure, end-to-end encrypted conversation tool for interacting with these agents.
Right. We aren't going to spend much time on it, but it's a vital reminder that autonomous agents are hitting every department. And as we give them access to sensitive data, secure, encrypted channels are going to become mandatory.
Absolutely. Definitely a space to watch.
So bringing it all together, what does this landscape overview actually mean for you, the listener? We've covered the terminals, claustrophobia, programmatic UI, and version-controlled skills.
If we synthesize this, the big picture is undeniable. The era of isolated command line interactions is rapidly ending. We are shifting toward rich visual environments with Nimbalyst and robust agent-native primitives with Stitch. We are giving models live spreadsheets, whiteboards, and UI controls.
And to make sure you walk away with actionable insights, I want to reiterate our core advice for the week. 3 pillars to take back to your teams. Number 1, prepare for the delayed maintenance costs of AI-generated code. The productivity is front-loaded, the maintenance is forever. Use visual workspaces to keep architecture understandable.
Number 2, demand MCPs that are agent-native primitives, not just API wrappers. We need tools built for how agents process data.
And number 3, start managing your AI skills as version timestamped assets. Stop hoarding static prompts. Timestamp your skill usage so your agent doesn't choke on outdated instructions.
You know, if we connect all this, I want to leave everyone with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Lay it on me.
We talked about Nimbalyst allowing agents to manage a Kanban board, and Stitch allowing agents to evaluate HTML and iterate on designs without human eyes.
Right. Doing the whole sprint cycle alone.
Exactly. Think about that trajectory. Right now, we use the visual workspace to assign tasks to the agent. But if the agent has full context, generates its own diagrams, evaluates its own UI, and moves its own tickets, how long until the agent hits a blocker and it is the one assigning tasks to you?
Oh, wow.
What happens when the AI basically becomes the project manager? It builds the UI, but hits a business logic edge case, so it tags the human developer because it needs a meat-based problem solver.
That is a wild thought. The AI dropping a ticket in my queue saying, hey, I pushed the front-end variants, but I need you to go talk to the client about this pricing rule. It's a complete inversion of our dynamic today.
The low-level pipes we're building right now are laying the exact groundwork for that scenario.
Well, on that slightly existential but incredibly exciting note, that wraps up our news of the week. The door is finally opening, and we don't have to look through the mail slot anymore. But man, the view outside is moving fast.
It really is.
To the listener, please make sure to subscribe. Let us know you're getting value out of this deep dive into the news. Stay insanely curious, and we'll catch you next time.